power of timing. Welcome. As I pondered today's title, I considered, quote, an integer raised to a power of ... close quote. For example, 2 raised to the power of 3 is 2 times 2 times 2, or 8.
What?
Exponentially speaking, one needs few raises to achieve massive change. An event raised to the power of timing also achieves magnified results. Let's talk about the power of timing.
Oh my gosh. Well, I can tell you what timing is. It's not that. Time is a moment. This very moment, Chris, this very one here.
So this is your definition of time?
This is my definition of time, and it's simple.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to hear it.
Time is a moment.
Yeah.
Right now.
A moment?
A moment. And now it's gone. It's the past. When you asked me about time, that's gone. It's over. It's the past. So we have to move on. Time is fleeting and minuscule, like the snap of a finger or the blink of an eye or a poor decision.
And yeah, like breaking somebody out of prison. Yeah. That's a poor decision.
Yeah.
That only took a moment.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It did, but maybe it wasn't a poor decision. So if we spend all of our time looking at the future, we miss the present. And that present moment is so precious because that's all it is just that snap of a finger.
Mm.
And so if we look at the past, then we're missing this moment too. So what we need to do is live in the moment. This one and very precious moment. All of which explains why regrets are a waste of time.
True.
And snails help you appreciate time.
Snails help you appreciate time.
Yes, because snails move so slowly that they live in this moment. They don't think about the future. They just are there.
But they don't live in the moment. They live in the mucus.
No, they live in their shell.
Look, I think you're off. And I think hear me out. Hear me out. I think you're off. And I think the reason that you're off is because I think you're thinking of a moment in time, where time is not just a moment.
It is. All that can be happening, the actual time is this moment.
You can argue if you want, but you're not right.
Now it's the past.
Yeah.
And it's not the time anymore.
Look, time is a sequence of a whole bunch of events all lined up. That one moment is just a moment. It has no meaning. It has no. It
has a lot of meaning.
Wait. It requires space in order for time to have meaning. And time is a linear progression of a whole bunch of these moments all put together in a linear fashion, one behind the other. There's 1 second now, another second after it, another second after that, and after that, and after that, and it continues on through. And time is the collection of all of those things put together. It's not just one of those moments. One moment all by itself like that doesn't have any meaning. Let's put it this way. Einstein was a heck of a lot smarter than I am. And I have never understood the theory of relativity.
Me either.
But the theory of relativity, or one of those theories that he wrote, I'm not exactly sure which one, had some very specific relationships between space and time that you couldn't have one without the other. If there wasn't some physical manifestation, then the time couldn't exist.
So I kind of get it. It's like being in a vacuum. Like if you're in a soundproof room and you can't hear anything, then that's different than being out in the real world. That's the absence of sound.
You are brilliant, Einstein.
So you think that The absence of space makes time non-existent.
I'm not talking about space like outer space. I'm talking about space as in a physical manifestation of a certain area. So space
So,
it doesn't matter if it's filled with air or if it doesn't have anything in it. It's still space.
do you suppose that if all of humanity was wiped out on our planet, that time would cease to exist because nobody'd be here to notice it?
Wow.
It's a valid question. I need an
Alrighty
answer.
then. I don't even know where to begin with that. What does that have to do with the power of timing?
Well, you said that it had to exist with space, only with space. And I'm thinking if you take away human beings who know that there's a time and a space, then maybe they can't exist.
Okay. Well, let's go to the definition of space. Not my definition, not your definition, but the definition.
I bet my definition's better.
Let's refer to Oxford, okay? So
Okay.
Oxford says that time is the indefinite continued progress of existence and events in the past, present, and future regarded as a whole.
Well, I don't think that's any simpler than the 2 to the power of 12.
I'm not saying that it's simple. What I'm saying, Toby, is that what the definition is referring to is that time is really sort of a measurement of a whole bunch of events or existence. So events are activities. The Super Bowl happened.
Right, but if
or
nobody's
your
here
birthday
to
came
see
and
the
went,
events,
or
do they really happen?
if nobody's there to see the events, well, there has to be somebody experiencing the event.
No, it could be like an earthquake. And if nobody's there, did it really happen?
It did happen. Time happened because there's an earthquake. If there wasn't an earthquake, then there's a question as to whether there was any time involved or whether there's any time at all. Matter of fact, there's no question at all. There wouldn't be any time. If there isn't anything physical that's existing, it's a part of having mass and having
Well, I don't know how.
having occupied a space is kind of critical to the experience of time.
I'm not quite sure how we did it, but we've managed to mess up time and make it so complicated that I'm not even sure what it is anymore.
Well, I'll be honest with you, Toby. I don't know what time is either. It's beyond me. I don't think that the abstract understanding of what time is I think beyond human comprehension. What I think is fascinating is that we have any understanding of it at all. I mean, in some respects, I prefer not even being aware of time.
Yeah.
I almost wish that I was like animals aren't. I don't think that they have really an awareness of time.
No.
And if it is, it's a very short time.
Well, like my dog Goldie used to know when I'd get off school and he'd meet me at the school to walk me home. So
Yeah.
he kind of knew timing,
Sort of, yeah.
but in
yeah,
a different
and that
way
was
than
timing
we did.
as well as
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
Mhm.
so all of that's true. But at the same time, I don't think that Goldie or any of the other animals really have a solid grip of, how old are they? When was
Yeah.
their birthday? How old are they going to live? Are they nearing the end of their
Right.
lifespan?
Yeah.
They don't understand any of that.
I don't think
think.
they do. I don't think
And I
they
don't
do.
think any of the rest of the animals do either, but we do. And I think that's part of what I think is fascinating, that we have this grip on time enough to scare us, but not enough for us to really comprehend what the heck it is.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we describe gravity? How do we describe God? How do we describe the cosmos? How do we describe
Well,
the
okay, we're
infinite-
getting way off track now.
No, well,
But
sort
yeah,
of, but
it's the
it's
same thing.
the point I'm getting at is that there are things that we sort of know about, but we don't really know how to define.
Okay.
And time is one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, having said that, I think we should take a shot at defining timing, which is different than time.
Oh, I can define timing.
Oh, I can't wait. Here,
I have the perfect example. So,
have at it.
I have 2 examples. First, I'll give the simple one. The timing of this podcast. It's Monday night. You're off on Mondays and Sundays. We try to record our podcast on Sunday or Monday so we can publish it on a Friday. And if we miss our Monday recording, then we might not get a podcast out this week. because we run out of time.
So timing in that case is sort of a timing of convenience.
Yes.
But then there's other timings that are more critical, like the
Well,
timing that if there's two boxers in a boxing ring and one throws a punch and the other one is just then at that same instant trying to duck out of the way of a punch and pushes his face forward and down, and the punch comes in at the same time and knocks him right on the nose. Well, then the guy that threw the punch had perfect timing, and the results are maximized by him winning the fight.
I don't know why two grown men would want to get in a boxing ring and hit each other. That's just stupid. It hurts. I have a better definition of timing.
I'm listening.
So I worked at Sprint for 14 years. I was a project manager, and man, do you need timing on projects? And when you're talking about Sprint and phone products, we're talking about teams of 200 or 300 or 400 people working on one project. And if you got to know what the right hand's doing, if you're the left hand, or stuff's not going to get done. We'd create these project plans that would put all the deliverables in there and all the dependencies. So if one thing was off, we'd know it would just cascade through this project plan. But another facet of timing that I was directly involved in at Sprint was that I was responsible for the sales tax calculation and reporting system, which we called TCRS creatively. And so when telephone calls, long distance telephone calls are taxed differently than a local phone bill, which we don't even have local phone bills anymore today. But back then you did, and you just taxed somebody's phone bill a certain amount based on what their $30 a month bill was. But for telephone calls, you have to tax each call separately, and you have to determine where the call originated, where the call terminated, and where the call is billed. And two of those three things have to be the same in order for there to be nexus and a call could be counted as taxable. Are you falling asleep? Stop. This is really good information. So one time I was on a project and they were working on some new product, and these product people said, okay, well, when we send these calls through the billing system, which was called IPS, we're going to put this code in there so IPS will just kick them out and won't really create a bill. It'll just create a paper bill so we can look at it and make sure it's calculating it properly. But the calls will never get billed to the customers. And I said, well, wait a minute. They're still going to get taxed. And they said, how can you tax a call? How can you tax a call if we don't bill it? Well, the taxes are calculated in the call detail system, which was called MPS. So MPS would create the call detail records, and they would calculate the taxes, and they would put it on that call detail record, and they'd send it to the billing system, and that billing system would add them all up, and then it would get billed. So their thought, which on the surface seemed logical, that if they just don't send these calls through the billing system, nobody will get billed for them.
Is this going to be a long story?
No, it's very short. Well, the actual design of the tax system took us 2 years, so I could talk about it for 2 years. But anyway, timing was important, and just because they assumed something, they had no idea where the calls were taxed. It was way back at the very beginning of the MPS system and the call details record system, and it worked its way through to get to the billing system.
So timing in complex,
especially in accounting,
yeah, corporate accounting, that's pretty critical.
Mm-hmm.
I have two more examples that are way more simple than that. So one is the timing in a car.
Oh yeah, I've heard of timing, like a time belt. Doesn't they have a timing belt?
Well, there's a time belt. There's a timing belt. There's a timing belt. There's also a distributor cap.
Oh, I heard of that.
And so this is all old,
and the
old
Sound
school,
of Music,
technology.
they took it off the car. The
Right.
nuns
They don't have that technology today. Everything is controlled by a computer
They don't
today.
have spark plugs either.
Right. So, but they back then they had a distributor cap with wires that went to each one of the spark plugs, and the pistons went at different times from each other. There were maybe 8 different pistons, and each one of them had to go on its own cycle in order for all of them to be pushing out power at a certain amount of time. And so the timing was really critical, that each one of those spark plugs had to fire at just the right time, and that was all controlled by timing. So the other one I think is interesting is the timing of the back in the World War One, the flying aces, like Snoopy and the Flying Ace, that kind of thing, those biplanes and stuff. They figured out that with those planes that they could mount a machine gun up on top of the hood of the aircraft and shoot the bullets out through. And there was a propeller out in front of it. And
they had to shoot between the
propeller blades, so that the timing was perfect, so that the bullets would go through.
Who figured that out?
Then a blade would go by, and a bullet would go by, and a blade would go by, and a bullet would go by.
Would the gunner guy have to watch and pull the trigger at the right time?
No. That's the whole point, is he could pull on the trigger, and the engine and the spinning of the blade would actually trigger the gun to go off.
So that's a whole lot better than having the guy watch for it spinning, because I think he would be able to do it.
With his watch and a little ticker on his watch, like, okay, pull the trigger. Okay, pull the trigger. Okay, pull the trigger.
Yeah, I don't think that would have worked so well.
Yeah, that's timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, so maybe that's... Okay, now, Pooh.
I love Pooh.
Yeah, who doesn't love Pooh?
Yeah.
There's a book here that we have from our library, and it's The Art of Pooh, not to be confused with the Tao of Pooh, which is a more philosophical view of what Pooh is all about, which is quite carefree if you don't know. But The Art of Pooh, this book has to do with the illustrations that E.H. Shepard was the guy that drew all the pictures and everything for the poetry that was written by Milne. And Milne was the guy that wrote the poetry and created Pooh, and Pooh was actually just a stuffed animal that his son, what was his name?
Christopher Robin.
Christopher Robin, that's right. Christopher Robin had a teddy bear, and they called him Pooh, and that's what this whole thing was all about. But anyway... on the back of the cover, I just thought this was interesting. Together, Milne and Shepard created a timeless world. I like that they use the word timeless, since our podcast is about time. So a timeless world with stories and images as resonant today as they ever were, and loved by children of all ages from generation to generation.
And that's true, because when was Winnie the Pooh written?
1927, I think, was...
And it's still today a popular story.
Yes, it is.
Almost 100 years later.
Well, it's not just stories. It turns out there were different installments of the progress that was being made. So timing was part of what took place with Winnie the Pooh.
I see.
And so...
I never really knew that it was originally published as poems. I want to get a copy of the poems. Are they in there?
No, the poems are not in here. This particular book is about Shepard, who is the illustrator.
Well, you can put that on my birthday list.
And for the record, the reason that this is making it into this podcast today, this episode today, is that Milne, who wrote the poems, is to time what Shepard is to timing.
Oh, okay.
So... Milne would not have been as great as he was, and Pooh would not have been as great as he was
and
is today,
and loved,
without the illustrator to really boost the whole thing along. So that's sort of the correlation between the two. But anyway, I wanted to read this couple of paragraphs that starts chapter 5. And the second volume of poems was published on October 13th, 1927, in both Britain and America, and was a follow-on from When We Were Very Young. So again, one more time, that was When We Were Very Young, was the name of the first volume.
Because it's not just when we were young, when we were very young.
Very young.
I love that.
As a writer, I don't like very, because it's an adverb, and we're warned against using it.
But it works in
But in this particular case, it's absolutely critical. So When We Were Very Young was the first installment of Pooh. And indeed, Milne himself wrote, "We have been nearly 3 years writing this book, We began it when we were very young, and now we are 6.
And that's
which is
the name
title
of the
the second book, is Now We Are 6.
I love it.
So I thought
it.
it was interesting because Now We Are 6 could have meant that there were only 5 people or 5 characters, and now there's one character added to it. Now we are 6.
Yeah.
But what he meant is that now we are 6 as in we are now 6 years old. And I think it's fascinating because a 6-year-old would be able to understand that he's 6 years old, but a 3-year-old doesn't know that he's 3. He just knows that he's very young.
Yes.
That's cool.
I like that.
That is really
like
cool.
That.
So I just thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah.
All right. So
that's pretty cool.
There was one more thing. Are we ready for this?
Yeah.
Yes. So.
By the way, I think Winnie the Pooh is a lot more interesting than Call Detail Records.
Yes, me too. Wow, me too.
I was fascinating though, Chris. It really was a great job.
It was great. Okay, so as I was perusing our library, it came up with Speeches That Made History is this book that we had on the shelf, and I just thought it was kind of interesting. And when we were discussing Einstein and the theory of relativity, these 2 speeches, or not even speeches, they were sort of just a phrase. Each one of them was a very powerful, influential, historical phrase that just really carried a lot of power. So I'm going to read both of these. So the first one, so this is page 50 and 51, which are sort of like 2 slices of bread from the same loaf. Okay, so
I like bread.
Yep.
Homemade bread.
Yep. So the first one is just 3 weeks before a nuclear bomb was dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, the technology was tested in practice for the first time. It was an implosion-designed plutonium bomb, like that which would be dropped on Nagasaki on the 9th of August. The director of the Manhattan Project was J. Robert Oppenheimer, who murmured this line from the Hindu Bhagavad Gita as he watched the explosion. Although in some versions of the story, he just thought it to himself. Because of his communist connections and political activities in the 1930s, he was always under suspicion and had to appear in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1953, after which he was stripped of his security clearance and lost his job.
And what was it he said?
And he mumbled, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Well, it was the truth.
I think that's an interesting statement. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. I mean, that's some powerful stuff.
Yes,
and
it is.
It comes from the Bhagavad Gita, which is sort of a Hindu Bible. It's the scripture, and it's what was uttered by their lead number one god, Vishnu, and he was trying to influence one of the Indian princes to do his job.
Oh.
And he thought that if he transformed himself into this creature that was terrifying and say, "Now I have become death," that the prince would get off his duff and do what he was supposed to do.
Okay.
I thought that was interesting.
Okay.
So Albert Einstein, A Cause for Unpredictability. One of the most brilliant scientists ever, Einstein did not agree with one of the basic tenets of quantum physics, that at the microphysical level of the workings of classical Newtonian physics do not apply, and it is impossible to determine, for example, in an atom where any one of its electrons might be, only the probability of where it might be. He argued that there must be a deterministic cause for this unpredictability. It was simply that it had not yet been found, whereas other physicists like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg believe that the behavior of the fundamental constituents of matter is entirely random. No cause has yet been found. And what Einstein said was, God does not play dice with the universe.
Interesting.
So I don't think this is just interesting. It's stinking fascinating to think that somebody that was Albert Einstein, that understood the theory of relativity and could think the way that he thought, and brought our whole human condition to the 20th century, to the 21st century, to where we are today technologically, that he understood that, number one, that there was a God, there is a God,
Mm-hmm.
and number two, that he doesn't play dice with the universe. There's no chance here.
Right.
God is in
Right.
control of
I
all
like
of
that.
it.
I
And I
like
just
that.
thought that was wow.
Yeah,
What
that's
a
pretty cool.
fascinating. These
I like
both of
that.
those are now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, and God does not play dice with the universe.
I'll take Albert Einstein for 2.
For 2.
Yeah. So usually at this point in our podcast, we talk about a current event in the criminal justice world. And we're going to deviate from that a little bit because I have 2 things in our personal criminal justice world that I just wanted to bring up. And I thought that those might be more interesting. So I received a message a couple weeks ago from someone on Facebook who said that their friend who was in prison had watched me on the Whitney Reynolds show and wanted to write to me, and would it be okay if she got my address to give to him? So I sent it to her, and I got this letter from this gentleman who's in prison. I'm not going to share his name, but he says he's an incarcerated author who unexpectedly found me on the Whitney Reynolds show. And as he watched the interview, he was captivated by my energy. He has spent 27 years in prison, yet he's always smiling.
So 27 years in prison, pretty strong indication that he's not just a little bit of a felon. He's over on the end of the spectrum that deserves big punishment.
Or it could be felony murder. We don't know.
Could be felony
murder, which would make him tie into this podcast even more.
Yeah.
So anyway, I really enjoyed this letter, and he said, "What gives you the power to smile after everything you've been through?" And I thought that was quite a profound question because most people don't ask things like that. And people in prison do think differently. They think deeper. And
well, being in prison or being out of prison or any other circumstance that anybody finds themselves in is sort of irrelevant to your decision to be happy.
It is. You totally own your decision to be happy. Perspective is everything.
Joy is that background running program
that
continues to run regardless of what your circumstances are.
He says he's written 40 novels, 3 screenplays, which is his latest hobby, and articles for his blog. And he's also been journaling for 5 years, all of it therapeutic, which is so true. I found writing to be so therapeutic when I was in prison. So anyway.
What I liked about his letter is he is articulate, almost to the point of eloquent.
Yes. His writing's even eloquent, you know.
Oh, you mean the printing, his handwriting is also kind of an interesting handwriting. But his vocabulary, his punctuation, his grammar, that guy, he's above the average inmate.
So I'm definitely going to write back to him.
Stuff.
I thought it was interesting.
I thought if you're going to share that I would also mention this, is that Daniel Green was in our previous podcast was sort of a moment that we addressed. And so Daniel Green is an inmate.
We saw him on a documentary.
Was it in the
somewhere,
documentary?
And I can't remember his story now. I'd have to go back and look it up.
We looked for him, and I wrote him a letter of an encouragement and to basically say to him that we're not here for ourselves. We're here for a much bigger cause. Toby and I are here for a bigger cause, and Daniel Green is here for a bigger cause, and the gentleman that wrote you that letter is here for a bigger cause. Yes. That where we are, whether it's in prison or otherwise, is secondary.
Mm-hmm.
The first primary thing is to do what God wants us to do, wherever that happens to be. So
we're going to keep trying to track Daniel Green down. We've sent letters to 2 different prisons.
Yeah,
They've
this
both
same
been
letter,
returned.
and they keep returning it from wherever we've sent it. And that's a bummer because I feel like this guy is at risk. There's a jeopardy here, and it's a timed kind of a thing. So we need to try to send this off to him again.
I'll look again and
try
see.
And catch him.
You know, they're moving him around, and maybe it's because he was on that documentary and he's getting lots of mail or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
But the other thing I wanted to share is I had someone reach out to me from the Idaho Department of Corrections, and they're going to be having this big re-entry event, and they've invited me to come and speak at their event. And I'm really excited about it. One of the things that the girl I was talking to said was that her sergeant, who's the sergeant of the reentry program, is in love with my podcast. And I don't know if it's my Fierce Conversations with Toby podcast or this one, but I'm going to try to find out.
I'm going to try and take some time off and go with you to Idaho.
Yes.
But also worthy of note is our church has agreed to
help us fund our trip.
To help us with the trip,
which is awesome.
And so we went to church yesterday, and I took a snapshot.
Oh yeah, the sermon was the power of timing.
Timing is everything.
Timing is everything.
Timing
That's
is everything.
What it was.
Is what the name of the
maybe that's what we'll call our
yesterday.
Podcast. We haven't decided on a title.
No, we have
yet.
Power of Timing.
Oh,
power of timing is important.
It's
different. It's not much different,
important.
but it's still different.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Anyway, I just thought that was worthy of mentioning. So, did anyone watch the Super Bowl this week?
Oh my gosh! I watched like a quarter and a half of it, and then I decided I would rather come work on some projects I'm doing than watch that mess.
It was a disaster. The first quarter and a half was just a sampling of what the entire thing was. The whole thing was what a mess. I'll tell you, if Patrick Mahomes could have had any worse timing, I don't know how that could have been. The timing was way off.
Well, you know what?
Everybody.
That line, our offensive line couldn't keep the people away from him.
Mm-hmm.
And he got so flustered that it just really messed up his timing, and he threw interceptions, they fumbled, they got sacked. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. It was just a fiasco.
Yeah, and what did I tell you before the game?
Before the game started, I mean, the Chiefs were going for this three-peat. It had never been done. And in order to do a three-peat, you got to win like 3 years in a row, and we're into the 3rd year. And Chris said to me, the best thing for the Chiefs would be if they lost today. And it's like, don't say it. Don't say it. It's the three-peat, It's not just we're winning the Super Bowl this year or losing. It's like we're losing the three-peat, which means you got to start all over if you're ever going to do it. So it'll probably never happen. And you said,
but what I mean is that if you took all of the best teams in the NFL and you took all their talent and you put each one of them into a bucket, and you filled that bucket to overflowing, and then you took a level and scraped off the top of the bucket, and now one is titled the Kansas City Chiefs, and one's titled the Philadelphia Eagles and the Buffalo Bills, and et cetera, et cetera. If you did that throughout the NFL, then ultimately the difference between winning and losing is character. So you have to have the heart of a lion.
Usually we do. I don't know what happened.
But talk for a moment. Talk about Jalen Hurts and the interview.
Oh, yes. So at the beginning of the Super Bowl, and I remember 2 years ago, we played the Eagles, and they were ahead and down until the last 8 seconds, because that's how Patrick Mahomes likes to do it. And we beat them. And they had a picture of Jalen Hurts, the quarterback,
dejected after the game.
So dejected with the
tons
red
of
and yellow confetti falling out of the sky and covering him.
Yeah.
And the journalist who was doing the interview said to him, I heard that you made that the screensaver on your smartphone. And he said, yes, I did. And she said, how long did that last? He said, it's still there. 2 years, it's still there, because he didn't want to forget how he felt, and he wasn't going to let it happen again.
A symbol of the humble sandwich fed to him by Patrick Mahomes 2 years ago that gave him a hunger to come into this game and do what he did.
His
and
all.
not just him, but the whole team.
Right.
All the Eagles, they showed up yesterday to win.
They did.
And the Chiefs didn't show up to win. The Chiefs showed up to roll into town and take the Super Bowl and get a third win and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm telling you, had they won yesterday, it would have been the worst thing for the Chiefs over the next 5 years. They wouldn't have gotten anywhere over the next 5 years. Because they lost yesterday, they'll come back next year with a fire in their belly.
Yes, they will. And, you know, Tom Brady even talked about that. He interviewed Patrick Mahomes before the game, and they talked about that. So I think that's interesting.
We're here at the favorite part of our episode, which is felony murder, inspired by John Maynard.
Yeah.
Which Toby fell in love with and helped him escape from prison back in 2006.
Yeah. I think you kind of fell in love with him, too, when you met him.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He was doing a life sentence for felony murder. He did not have a gun in his hand. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't pull the trigger. He didn't kill anybody. Just like all the other felony murder people that go. And he was a minor. There's tons of things about his story, but the bottom line here is that he got a life sentence because he was too young and stupid to realize that he should have cooperated.
He was at.
He should have cooperated with his defense attorney, and he didn't do that. So what's the story today? So
today I have an interesting story, and it just popped up because it actually happened today. So in 2021, there was an incident at some apartments in Alabama, and there was a group of guys who went to this apartment complex for one reason or another. It doesn't say. And there ended up being a gunfight. And one of these guys that went to this apartment complex was killed. And so, of course, they arrested the other 3 people who went to the apartment complex with him to charge them with felony murder. But today, a judge granted a request by the prosecutors to dismiss the felony murder charge against the man accused of driving the getaway car. So what actually happened, because we heard from the defense attorney, this kid's name was Javin, and Javin was at this apartment complex with DeMarcus and Jamin, and then the kid who was killed was named Calvin. And Calvin got shot in a shootout and died. And Javin was sitting in the passenger seat of the car, and the other guys were outside of the car. And when he heard the gunshots, he jumped over into the driver's seat of the car and drove away to escape the gunfire. And the prosecutors called him the getaway driver.
Oh, I didn't notice that Jamon and Javin
are
brothers.
That's right.
So they're both, their last name is Merida. And so Longmire and Jamon pleaded guilty to robbery as part of a plea deal. And so the only other one was the other, which is Javin.
Javin was still going to go to trial. He wasn't going to plead guilty because he just was trying to escape this gunfight. And the only evidence they had against Javin was a statement made by Longmire after he'd already asked for an attorney and said he didn't want to answer any questions. And so the beautiful thing about this is that the judge in this case last week did his job and said he wasn't going to allow the statement from Longmire to come into the courtroom. And the prosecutors didn't have any other evidence to present to charge him with felony murder, so they agreed to drop the charges.
So super important on our podcast, officially, kudos to the judge for following the law and doing what he was supposed to do. So that's good. As a cautionary note for all the rest of us, remember that the best thing to do is don't say anything and ask for an attorney. It doesn't matter whether you did or did not do anything. That's not the point. If you ask for an attorney and you get an attorney on your side before you have any interviews or interrogations or anything else, before you say anything at all, if you get an attorney on your side, then you can run everything through your attorney. It's up to you whether you wanted to add something to the record later. You can always add more to the record later. What you can't do is take anything off of the record once you've said it. So keep your mouth shut and talk to an attorney.
And, you know, kudos to the judge for doing his job and caring about justice and procedure instead of a conviction.
All right, let's do this quick. Next week is metronomes.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I like that one or not.
You always say that.
I don't think I do.
It's metronomes. Ooh, metronomes. Anybody know what a metronome is?
Yes, you click it when you're playing the piano.
Okay.
That's what I know about
next week we'll put together some metronomes
information. I can hardly wait.
I wonder what metronomes might have to do with felony murder.
Might just be the ticking of the clock. The constant, always, regular, never deviating tick, 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 tick of that clock.
Yeah, maybe.
So,
we'll see.
Time's precious, a sequence of events of which each one may be maximized by the power of timing. We strive to master them. We hope our listeners understand a little better how great timing can benefit their lives. Or, if your timing's off, you throw an interception or two.
Share your story with us. Hashtag 2 Doors Timing. We'd love to hear it. 2 Doors Down, where Toby already blinked, so who knows if our timing is off.
It probably is. Subscribe on YouTube at 2 Doors Down. For exclusive content, check out our Patreon channel. Our website is twodoorsdown.com.
Until next time.